Hello, one and all. I hope you are all well. Welcome to this lesson today, which is designed to guide you through how we can reduce the effects of tropical storms. So I'm just going to present my screen now so that you can see my slide deck with all of the information that you're going to be needing throughout the course of this lesson. Remember, this is a live lesson, so what I will do is I will put different time limits onto the tasks that you'll be doing, and you'll be able to do it along with the video. So over the course of the last couple of sessions, we've been looking at some of the effects of tropical storms, and we focused on one particular case study, and the case study that we focused on was Typhoon Haiyan. What we need to do now, though, is we need to look at how we can reduce the impacts of tropical storms, because let's face it, the whole reason why we study any kind of natural disaster, and tropical storms are definitely included within that, is so that we can try and minimize the risk and minimize the loss of lives, because ultimately it's human beings that we care about. So in terms of the success criteria for this lesson, I expect you to be able to know the difference between monitoring, predicting, protecting and planning. Okay, so those are our basic three strategies for reducing the impacts of tropical storms. Now, I don't just want you to be able to tell me what each of those different things mean. I want you to be able to give examples of how we can monitor, how we can predict, how we can protect, and how we can plan. And I'm going to guide you through those examples throughout the course of this lesson. Now, there is a target question that I want you to do at the end of this video, and that target question is explain how we can prevent people from losing their lives due to tropical storms. And ultimately, if you can answer that target question, you should be able to tick off everything that we've got in our success criteria. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with the basics. We need to make sure that we can define the words monitoring, predicting, protecting and planning. Now, I know it might seem like common sense, but we need to start building our knowledge upwards from the base. So if you monitor something with respect to a tropical storm, what we're doing is we're using technology in order to be able to follow a tropical storm, to be able to track where it's going. And ultimately, if we can start to do that, it will lead into our second word, which we've got down here, which is predicting. So if we can monitor and track a tropical storm, we can use that technology to estimate what will happen to it. And if we can estimate what will happen to a tropical storm, we can start to put our plans from our planning phase into effect. And here's an example of something which I'm going to show you a video of in a moment, which is called the Hurricane Hunter, where we've got some brave people that fly through hurricanes, and they fly through hurricanes in order to be able to take measurements such as wind speed, humidity, in order to be able to track where that hurricane or that tropical storm might hit. Then we've got protection. And protecting something is when we try to prevent the damage that's being caused by a tropical storm. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. And how you protect will very much depend upon which type of country you're in. Protection in the United States of America may look very, very different from a vulnerable area in a low-income country or an LIC such as Bangladesh. And then finally, we've got planning. And planning is all about raising individual and community awareness for tropical storms. Now, we're quite fortunate in the UK that we don't live in the path of tropical storms, so we don't need to have plans. But if we lived in somewhere like southern Florida, we almost certainly would have a plan within our family of how we're going to mitigate and how we're going to protect ourselves from the impacts of a tropical storm. So the first one that I want us to look at is this one here, which is monitoring and predicting. So essentially, because technology has been developing, we are better able to track hurricanes, we're better able to monitor them, and we can be pretty accurate, to be honest, in terms of where we think they're going to go and how much damage they could potentially cause when they impact and when they hit land. So let's have a little look at this video of the brave hurricane hunters and how they fly through these hurricanes to be able to collect that really, really crucial scientific data.
A hurricane hunter's airplane gives an up-close view of a terrifying storm. The reconnaissance plane, a Lockheed WP-3D Orion, nicknamed Kermit the Frog, powers through Hurricane Dorian. It's operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Kermit is staffed with researchers and crew with nerves of steel who hope to learn more about the devastating storm. Hurricane Dorian tore a destructive path through the Bahamas. It left downed trees, wrecked homes, and crushed cars in its wake. The Category 5 hurricane had winds of 185 miles per hour, with gusts approaching 220 miles per hour. Dorian is among the most powerful storms ever recorded in the Atlantic. Residents in the southeastern U.S. are bracing for Dorian, and weather experts caution that even if the core of the storm doesn't make landfall, it can still pack a powerful punch. This is InsideEdition.com.
Okay, so what you can see there is an example of how they can collect that data in order to be able to put those action plans into place. And at the end of that video, you saw people boarding up their homes and boarding up their houses. That's on the advice that's given to them by the National Hurricane Center in Miami. So basically what we can do is we can use these big developments in technology to be able to monitor and predict storms more accurately. And as it says here, if we can track where a hurricane is likely to hit, we can start to make plans to save people's lives through things such as evacuations. And that's what you saw in the video, people boarding up their windows and boarding up their homes. And let's face it, just getting out of there in order to be able to save their lives. Now, in the North Atlantic, there are 2 levels of warnings that are issued from the National Hurricane Center in Miami and Florida. You get a hurricane watch, and hurricane watch basically advises people that hurricane conditions are possible. So it's just a kind of, right, let's be aware, ocean is quite warm at the moment. We've got lots of humidity. We've got thunderstorms that could start to gather together and start to circulate to create those tropical storms. And then you get your hurricane warning. And when that hurricane warning comes out, you're advised that hurricane conditions are expected. And if you get that hurricane warning, you need to take immediate action. And usually that will be in the form of evacuating to higher ground. So the first level is the watch, just be aware, and the warning is act. I guess we have similar things in the UK, but not necessarily for hurricanes. We have sort of flood warnings, and we have severe flood warnings, which kind of are the similar sort of thing, but on a slightly different scale. So that's our first element, which is monitoring and predicting. So what I would like you to do now is I'd like you to draw up a table which has got 3 columns. The first one is going to be monitoring and predicting. The second is going to be protecting, and the third is going to be planning. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to be able to create that table in whichever format you want to create it. Google Docs would probably be the best one if you're submitting work via Google Classrooms. And I'll give you the time to do that now for 2 minutes. Away you go. Okay, just 10 seconds. And remember, if you need a little bit more time, all you need to do is to pause this particular slide deck. Okay, right, fantastic stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do now then is I am going to just skip back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go back to that original slide which I gave you guys, which is about monitoring and predicting. I'm going to give you a second time limit now. That time limit is going to be 4 minutes. And within this 4-minute time limit, what I would like you to do is to try and get some of this information down into that first column, which is about monitoring and predicting. I don't expect you to write everything out in full. And what you'll notice is I've put some of the words in red. And I've put some of those words in red to kind of help you to be able to break down the information. So you've got the word technology, track, plans, save lives, evacuation, National Hurricane Centre, watch, warning. Okay, just to give you some clues as to what to expect. Okay, so 4 minutes. Remember, if you are struggling, then all you guys need to do is to pause the video, and then that will help you on your way. Okay, right. Hopefully that was enough time for you to be able to pick up the information that you needed. And that covers our first strand, which is about monitoring and predicting. So now it's time for us to move on, and we're going to move on to the next phase. And our next phase is looking at protection. So in terms of protection, what we're talking about is sort of basically protecting buildings, protecting infrastructure, protecting businesses, homes, all sorts of different things like that. There are quite a few options that are available to us. Again, in the video of the hurricane hunters, we saw them bolting up their doors and their windows to be able to strengthen and reinforce them. That's probably the simplest thing that we can do. In certain places, particularly in the USA, they construct things called storm drains. And here you can see an example of a storm drain. This one's empty at the moment, but the storm drain is designed to take away all of the heavy rainfall and to funnel it into one location to be able to prevent flooding from happening. Because remember, it's not just about the winds, it's about that uplift of the sea level due to the low pressure. And it's that storm surge and that flood of water coming in that can cause an awful lot of damage and can cause an awful lot of deaths. So with that in mind, you can also build seawalls. Seawalls can protect properties from things such as storm surges. And sometimes it's not uncommon to see houses built on stilts so that storm surge waters can pass underneath it, because let's be honest, we can't stop people from living near the coast. It's quite a desirable place for people to live. Now, the protection will obviously depend on whether or not you are a high income country or whether or not you are a low income country. So, all of those things might not be practical for every single person in a low income country. They probably haven't got buildings and homes which are made of really, really strong materials. So, in order to protect people, you kind of have to protect people as a community and en masse. So here's an example of a structure which is built in Bangladesh, and there are around about 2,000 of these across the country. These are storm shelters, and they're designed for the whole community to go to one location in the event that there is a tropical storm or a cyclone. So here you can see that it's built of really strong concrete. It's got stairs so that people can pass up different levels. They use bicycles to give warnings to remote communities. So the people that are manning the shelter, they get on their bikes and they go out to villages to warn people that it's coming. It's built on stilts, as I said there, and raised up on the ground in order to be able to prevent that storm surge. And actually, what makes this more sustainable is that most of the time it's not used as a storm centre. They can use them as schools, they can use them as medical centres, they can use them as community centres, and they can become a real hub of the community and help people en masse to be able to save lives. So that gives you a really, really specific example of some of the things that you can do in a low income country like Bangladesh. So what I want us to do now is I want you to go to your second column on your table. And the second column of your table is protecting. This time I'm going to give you a time limit of 3 minutes. Okay. In terms of protecting, again, what I've done is I've put some of the key information in red here to make it easier for you to get that information down. See if you can get your bullet points under protecting into your table. Okay, and hopefully that was enough time for you. If it wasn't, remember you can always pause it, you can always rewind it and go back in order to be able to complete some of those tasks. I'd rather that you understood it and that you took your time than trying to race through it at the speed of this particular video. So that leaves us just one more strand to look at, and our last strand that we need to look at is planning. So I said it earlier, we can't stop tens of millions of people from living in coastal areas. Lots of people rely on it for fishing, particularly in low income countries where that's their way of making an income and making money. Also for tourism, and it's vital. And people just like to live next to the coast and next to the sea. So what you need to do is you need to plan. You need to raise awareness with individuals and communities. And if you raise awareness, people know what to do. They know how to react in the event that a tropical storm might hit. So if people understand the potential dangers, then they're better able to respond. Now, in the United States of America, they have what's called Hurricane or National Hurricane Preparedness Week. And what they have is they have a program where each day they have different things to educate people on the dangers of the coming hurricane season. That way, it's fresh in people's minds, and then families can go away and they can devise their own plan of action should that hurricane warning be issued from Miami. So the last strand then that we've got on our table for you guys to complete is that planning strand. Okay. The information that you need is in front of you. I'm going to give you a bit longer for this because you've got a few more bullet points. This time I'm going to give you 4 minutes to see if you can jot down some of the ways in which they can plan and prepare Okay, so that's the last one done. So we should be in a position now where we've completed all three strands of our table. So you've got your independent notes on monitoring and predicting, protecting and planning. What I would like us to do now then is I would like us to kind of consolidate everything that we've done so far. And I said that there was going to be a target question. And this is the question that I now want you to complete. And it says, explain how we can prevent people from losing their lives due to tropical storms. Now, if we were in the classroom, I'd get you to box the command word. The command word is explain. That tells us we need to be able to use connective words in order to be able to develop our answers. We're looking at how we can prevent people from losing lives. Okay, now we know that there are essentially 3 to 4 ways that we can prevent people from losing their lives. We can do it through monitoring and predicting, protecting, and planning. Now, if you're going to achieve in this target question, there are basically 3 things that you need to do. You need to identify the ways that we can save lives from tropical storms. Okay, so if you were writing an answer to this question, mention monitoring, mention predicting, mention planning, mention preparing. Then what you need to do is you need to give at least one example of each. So give me an example of monitoring and predicting. Use the hurricane hunter perhaps as an example. Give me an example of protection, perhaps maybe rising up buildings and placing them on stilts to prevent from storm surges. And then give me an example of how we can plan. An example of how we could plan might include the National Hurricane Preparedness Week. Now, remember, geography is a study of the real world. So where possible, we always need to be able to use real locations. Okay, so this is your final task that I would like you to do as part of this lesson. I want you to answer the question which says, how can we prevent people from losing their lives due to tropical storms? Now, I reckon in an exam, you probably have about 6 minutes. If this were a 6-mark question, I'm going to be a bit more generous. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. Okay. And I'd like you in those 8 minutes to be able to respond to that question using each of those 3 individual bullet points to be able to support you with your answers. Okay, and welcome back. Hopefully that's been long enough for you to be able to answer that target question. Now, last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my answer to the question. And I'm going to show you my answer to the question so that you can see where I am picking up each of these 3 points that I've got here in order to hit that success criteria. So to start off with, I've said we can prevent the loss of life from tropical storms by monitoring, predicting, protecting and planning. So if you look here, I've highlighted that in red because that's ticking off my first point. I've identified the ways in which we save lives from tropical storms. I then go on to say we can use technology such as the Hurricane Hunter to collect data and track tropical storms. This means that there's my connectives that I'm starting to use in order to get that command word explain. We can give warnings from places such as the National Hurricane Center in Miami to evacuate and save lives. In addition to this, we can protect. This could include reinforcing buildings with stronger windows and doors or building evacuation centers on stilts to prevent flooding from storm surges as they have in Bangladesh. You can also plan in the USA, there is a National Hurricane Preparedness Week to get people to prepare their plans in case a tropical storm hits land. The more prepared, the more lives saved. So if we look at the second point that I've got there about giving examples, you can see that I've highlighted here the Hurricane Hunter as an example, reinforcing buildings, evacuation centers on stilts. And in terms of real world locations, well, I've mentioned the National Hurricane Center in Miami. I've mentioned and I've put specific reference to the stilts and the evacuation centers in Bangladesh. And I've mentioned the USA's National Hurricane Preparedness Week. Now that's the end of this lesson. If you wanted to take things a little bit further, what you could do is you could have a look at my model answer to the question. You could look at your original answer to the question. And if you feel like you've still got some time, I would advise you to go back and to see if you can improve on your original answer. Redo it and use my model answer to support you and guide you with that process. Hopefully this has been useful, and we will pick up next time with a bit more in terms of weather and climate hazards, but we'll start to focus a little bit more on the United Kingdom. Hope you're all well. Goodbye.